Okay, hello everyone. Thanks very much for joining this Azure Hangout. So, for those that are new, this is the 11th Azure Hangout in this series. And today we'll be talking about managing Azure subscriptions and resources. So, this is the very first Hangout covering the new Microsoft certification exams. So, what I will be doing is at the beginning, we'll go through some introduction to what the new Azure certifications look like. By the way, has anyone that's part of the Hangout, has anyone done the new exam yet? Or anyone planning to do the new exam? Because when I did I did the exam in beta stages and I passed the administrator exam. I got my result for the Azure Solutions Architect exam today, so which was great. But anyone already passed the exam? Yeah, thanks very much. Okay, so what I'll do is let's get started with what we're talking about. So today, what I'll start with is we'll talk about the Azure role-based certification overview. Just give a quick description of what that looks like. We'll talk about Azure subscriptions. Essentially, we're going to be laying the foundation for all the other things that we'll be talking about throughout this series, Azure subscriptions. Then we'll talk about Azure billing, and we'll talk about Azure governance, and Azure monitoring and diagnostic. So this particular one, I'll explain how that's going to work. It's split into two because I don't think we'll be able to cover all the content that we have on the screen because of the time that we have. But we'll see how much we can cover. We can pick it up from next week and we just carry on. Um, so just a quick information on what the new Azure role-based certification exam, what that looks like. So much more recently, last year at the Build conference in May 2018, Microsoft announced that they'll be moving away from the technology-focused certifications. Right, you have, certification focused on Server 2016, certification focused on Azure, certification focused on certain technologies. They'll be moving away from that to what they call role-based certification. So certifications that are designed around certain roles. So what that could mean is that potentially, maybe the certifications may cross boundaries of technologies, but it's designed around certain roles. So what do you need to know to be an Azure administrator? What do you need to know to be an Azure developer? What do you need to know to be an Azure solutions architect? So that's what they're moving toward. And it's not just Azure, that applies to Office 365 also. So they have new role-based certifications for Office 365, for Windows 10, and they will carry on releasing this more and more. So by the way, I need to get rid of the chat. Okay, that's good. So then they announced the Azure DevOps Engineer. So this one was announced, I think, sometime late last year. The certification was released in beta stage, but as you see on the next slide, it's one that Microsoft essentially they withdrew a bit. So we'll see that. So what does the exams look like? What happens is you have different levels. You still have your fundamental level, which is the basics. So you can start with the Microsoft Certified Azure Fundamentals level. This is optional. You don't have to do this. But if you do this, that can lead you into other certifications and into other roles. But then you have the associate level. At the associate level, there are two main ones, which are the Azure Administrator Associate, which is what we're starting with today, and there's the Azure Developer Associate, which is another one that's available, which is the AZ-200, 201, and 202. But then you also have the expert levels. So the expert level, we have the Azure Solutions Architect Expert level, which is also part of everything we'll be doing. In this whole Azure Hangout series, we'll be covering Azure Administrator certification, the entire curriculum, and we'll be covering the Azure Expert certification, the entire curriculum. And also there's the Azure DevOps Engineer Expert level that they announced, which they decided. So if you go and look this up on Microsoft website, they've paused the beta exam. And what that usually signifies is that they have some concerns around the exam based on feedback that they've gotten from other people. And what they've decided to do was to pause it for a while they restructure the exam. So they did a similar thing for the Azure Developer Associate exam. They've restructured it and they've released a brand new exam to replace the old one. So I wouldn't be surprised if this Azure DevOps Engineer exam is restructured when next you see it released by Microsoft. But moving on to the learning part that we are covering, because we ought to have an idea of what we'll be covering. So this is where we'll be starting today. We'll be starting at managing subscriptions and resources. So that's where we'll be starting today. But you can see that we have 5 learning paths, which is going to lead us into the AZ-100 certification. And then we have another 5 learning paths, which will lead us into the AZ-101 certification. And then we end up with the Azure Administrator Associate certification, which is the first part of this whole series. Then we'll pick it up from there, and then we'll do the one for the solution architect. So that's what we'll be covering throughout the duration. Let's have a quick look at what some of those learning paths mean, because I want to quickly get through to the interesting stuff. So the learning part of what we're starting today, managing Azure subscriptions and resources. And whenever you see the percentages in front of this, what the percentages signify is that roughly the percentage of questions that you should be looking for in the exam. Not necessarily that it's going to be 15%, it's going to vary. So, for example, you have manage Azure subscriptions and resources. Expect about 15 to 20% of the questions in your exam to be based on that. Same thing about managing storage, then managing Azure virtual machines and deploying them, configuring and managing virtual networks, and managing identity. So all of this in different percentages. And we'll go through all of this starting from the very first one. And you can see the link to the exam over there. So today we are starting with AZ-100.1, which is Azure Subscriptions. So let's get right into this very interesting subject matter for us to cover. So we'll start by talking about Azure Subscriptions. So I think the very first place for us to begin when talking about Azure Subscription is let's cover what the Azure resource hierarchy looks like, because this is going to give us an understanding of how subscriptions fit into the whole thing. So if you want to consume Microsoft Azure, you want to deploy resources on Microsoft Azure, there are a lot of services and resources that we can deploy on Azure. The very first thing that we need is we need an Azure subscription. We'll get into more details on what subscription means when we talk about subscription. So when we create our Azure subscription, we can create resource groups within the Azure subscriptions, and then we can deploy resources within those resource groups. In the Azure context, every resource has to be associated with a resource group, and resource groups are associated with a subscription, which is a hierarchy that we have in Azure. So let's go to a bit of whiteboarding here. So, because I want to share some very good diagrams over here with you. So going back to where we started, what we have is we have Azure subscription. Let's go over here, right? We have Azure subscription, we have Azure resource group, and we can have our resources under that. The thing is, what options do we have whenever we want to set up our Azure subscription? There are different options that are available. But before we can set up our Azure subscription, we need to have Azure Active Directory. That's the only prerequisite that we need to set up our Azure subscription. So what I'll do here is I'll put on some notes to help us to understand. So to set up Azure subscription, the only prerequisite is that we need an Azure Active Directory tenant. That's the only prerequisite for what we need. We need an Azure Active Directory tenant. Now, if we don't have an Azure Active Directory tenant when we're setting up our subscription, one will be created for us when we're doing that. This is very important. So what I'll do is if I try to go set up in Microsoft Azure free trial subscription, it's going to ask me to put in an email address. I can put in a work email address. I can put in a Microsoft email address, a Microsoft account, a work account. I put that in there. If I don't have an Azure Active Directory associated with that, as part of the process, it's going to create an Azure Active Directory tenant for me. And what it's going to do it, let's say my email address is david.kayode@outlook.com, and I'm creating a brand new subscription and I don't have an Azure Active Directory tenant associated with that. What it's going to do is it's going to set up a new Azure AD tenant that's going to be David Kayode Outlook dot on Microsoft.com. So if I do not have an existing Azure Active Directory tenant, it's going to set up a default one using this format of .on Microsoft.com. You may be going, why am I talking about this? Why is this that we're talking about? Why is this even important at all? Here's the reason why it is important. Let's take a step back and I show you a few things. Let's go here. Let's say I'm an organization. And in my organization is called, let's say, Azure Hangout organization. Just follow me closely here. We're going somewhere meaningful. That's my organization, Azure Hangout organization. If I go to set up any Microsoft cloud service, not only Azure, if I go to set up, let's say, Office 365 subscription, or I go to set up, let's say I go to set up Microsoft Intune, which I'll get one, or I go to set up Dynamics 365, for this organization. The probability is that when I set up these subscriptions, I already have an Azure Active Directory tenant associated with this subscription. And what that means is that if I already have any of the services, whenever I'm setting up my Azure subscription, I probably don't want to set up a new Azure Active Directory tenant. What I want to do is I want to associate my existing Azure Active Directory tenant with my Azure subscription. So what I'm trying to say is you've got to be careful if you're setting something up brand new for an organization. You want to find out, do they currently use any of these Microsoft cloud services? If they do, chances are, not chances are, they already have an Azure Active Directory tenant associated with any of these subscriptions. And by that reason, if you're setting up Azure for that organization, you want to link that with your existing Azure Active Directory tenant. So just be aware of that because that can confuse multiple individuals of now they have different Azure Active Directory tenants spread out everywhere. You probably may not want to do that for your organization. Does that make sense at all? Does that make a bit of sense to you, or does anybody have any question regarding that? Yeah, everybody all good with that? Okay, so now let's move forward a bit. Let's talk about what an Azure subscription is. So I'll go to another slide to give you more information about that. So let's go to what an Azure subscription is. So number one, I put here, I said an Azure subscription is a container for your Azure resources. I mean, we already saw that with the first diagram that I showed to you, which I'll go back to the whiteboard and I'll bring that up again. So I showed you this diagram where I had this and this here. So it's a container for our resources. We cannot deploy resources on Azure without having an Azure subscription. So that's very straightforward. That's understandable. Let's move on. What else? An Azure subscription is a billing boundary. That's important. So there's a bit of changes here, but I'll talk about that as we go on. An Azure subscription is a billing boundary. What that means is this. What that means is if as an organization, I have multiple Azure subscriptions. So what we'll do is we'll make this a bit smaller and we'll have multiple of this. I have an Azure billing subscription. This Azure subscription is going to be billed separately from this subscription. If I spend money in this subscription over here, I won't see the charge on the subscription over there, even if both subscriptions are linked to the same Azure AD tenant, right? This Azure AD tenant is linked to these different subscriptions. Their billing boundaries, this resource here, it's not going to be charged over to the subscription over there. So it's important. So there are situations where there may be exceptions to that. I'll talk about that as we go on. But that's what I mean by an Azure subscription is a billing boundary. I also mentioned here, I said an Azure subscription is an administrative boundary. Now, what do we mean by that? We mentioned that the prerequisite for creating an Azure subscription is you need an Azure Active Directory tenant. What do you have in your Azure Active Directory tenant? You have users. So permit me to introduce you to 4 new users. Right? So I'm going to introduce you to 4 new users. We have Mr. John. We have Mrs. Susie. We have Mr. Mike. And we have Mr. Tim. So my 4 new users. I've created these 4 new users in this Azure Active Directory tenant. What I decide to do is I decide to give John, or Mr. John, permission to be the owner or the manager of this Azure subscription. And I decide to give Mrs. Susie permission as the owner of this Azure subscription. That subscription limits that boundary. So this Mrs. Susie has permission to this Azure subscription and all the resources in this subscription. But Mrs. Susie cannot access resources in this subscription if she's not an owner of that subscription. So the subscription is an administrative boundary. It sets the boundary of I attach permission to this subscription. That's it. Your permission is limited to that subscription over there. So that's what we mean by an Azure subscription is an administrative boundary. I also mentioned an Azure subscription is a resource deployment boundary. This one is very important for 2 things. Because there may be situations where people ask questions around, okay, I have my virtual network, which we'll get to in this subscription. I have my virtual machine in this other subscription. Can I connect my virtual machine over here to this virtual network in this other subscription? The answer is no. Right? You cannot take this virtual machine over here and when you're creating it, select a virtual network that's linked to another subscription. No, you cannot do that. The reason why you cannot do that is because a subscription is a resource deployment boundary. What you can do is you can have a virtual network in this one. You can have a virtual network here. You can probably connect VNet peering to connect them together, but you cannot link a virtual machine here to a virtual network over here. You won't be able to select it. So actually, I can show that to you very quickly because I have over here with me, or signed in over here, is I have my Azure portal. And in my Azure portal, if I go under subscriptions, I have multiple subscriptions here. And I won't actually be deploying anything. I just want to show you. I've got an Azure for Students subscription. I have MSDN. I've got PayAsYouGo Dev Test. What I'll do is if I go under virtual networks, you'll see I have a virtual network that's in this subscription, my MSDN subscription, right? What I'll try to do is I'll go try to create a new resource, which I'm not going to go through with it. I just want to make that point clear to you. I'm going to create a new resource. And whenever I'm creating a resource, it's going to say select the subscription because the subscription is where the charges are going to go into. And it's also going to determine who's going to have access to you. So I'm going to select not MSDN platform. I'm going to select Azure for Students just for a demonstration. And I'll do Azure VM RG and I'll click OK. And I give it the name Azure VM01. Give it a username, Azure admin, and give it a password. I'm just going to leave all of that as the default because I just want to show you what I mean. If I go to next on the networking, Now, when I have to select a network, when I click on the drop down, you see that I cannot select a network in another subscription. Why? Because again, resources by default, which is what I mentioned here, it's a resource deployment boundary. So the resources stays within its subscription. That's it. It's got links to resources within its subscription. Okay. Mention each subscription can have a different billing and a payment setup. And you can see that from even my own. So what could happen is I could have subscription number one, and this is linked to a different credit card. Maybe it's PayAsYouGo. I could have subscription number two. This is linked to another different credit card, or this could be a completely different subscription type. We'll get to the types of subscription in a minute. But I could have different payment options. Maybe this one is linked to the credit card of the development team. Maybe this one is linked to the credit card that's for the IT team. It's not necessarily that it has to be credit card. There's something called enterprise agreement subscription, which we'll touch on. But just be aware of that a subscription can have a different billing and payment setup. And I mentioned here, I said each subscription is subject to quotas. It's also very important to know about subscription. Subscription is subject to quotas. So for example, I'll bring up a web page here in a minute. I can type in Azure subscription quotas into Google. And it's going to show me, it says Azure subscription limits and quotas. That's very important because the quota is assigned or associated with subscriptions. That's one of the reasons why organizations may have multiple subscriptions. So maybe to get around a quota, maybe they've already hit the quota limit of one subscription, which allows them. So for example, how many, let's go to one of the popular ones, virtual networks. How many virtual networks can you have within a subscription? And this is per subscription per region. That's classic. Let's look for Azure Resource Manager. You can have up to 1,000. So maybe you're doing something absolutely crazy. You need more than that. So you to be able to get around that, you may have to set up a different subscription because a subscription is limited to particular quotas. But what you can do is if you want to get around that quota limit, you can start a new subscription and then you can get around that. But be aware of that. And as mentioned, every cloud service belongs to a subscription, and that's referring to every service you deploy in Azure. So just a quick overview of what the services are that we can deploy in Azure. If I do Azure Services, you see the different categories and directory of Azure Cloud Services. And you can see different categories. I can go to on the compute and you can see different compute services that we have. I can see different container services that we have, different database services that we have on Azure. Any of the services that you deploy, just be aware that they're going to be linked to a subscription, as you can see from this diagram also, right? So this resources, those are your different services, and it's got to be linked to a subscription because that's where they'll be charged to. That's what's going to define what they can access or not. Does that make sense? Because I'm about to move on now to other things. Yeah, everybody all good with that explanation? Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about another thing. So we talked a little bit about subscription. Let's talk about what are the different subscription types that we have, because we have different subscription types. Let's talk about that. So there are different types of Azure subscriptions. We have enterprise subscriptions. I'll talk to you a little bit about that. I'll give you certain links that you can use to get more information about that. We have subscriptions that you can buy from resellers. We have partner subscription that you can get from a Microsoft partner or even someone that's your partner and Microsoft partner. And you have personal subscriptions, different types of subscriptions. So for example, if you're an enterprise, let's talk about this very quickly. If you're an enterprise, you probably, have different challenges than a personal user. So what Microsoft have is they have a type of subscription called the Microsoft Enterprise Agreement. Microsoft Enterprise Agreement subscription. Let's talk a little bit about that. What I'll do first of all is I'll take you to a web page. And let's bring this up over here. You can see add Azure to a Microsoft Enterprise Agreement. Very simple and straightforward. So if you're already a Microsoft Enterprise Agreement customer, you can add Azure as part of that. What's going to happen is you are going to be committing to, going to make an upfront monetary commitment. In other words, you're going to be saying to Microsoft, we're going to be consuming Azure to the tune of $200,000 this year. We're going to make that upfront commitment. And as part of that upfront commitment, you get certain benefits from Microsoft. So for example, you get additional discounts in terms of the charges that you'll be paying for spinning up certain resources. So you get certain discount from Microsoft to be able to do that. Any existing Microsoft Enterprise customer that has an enterprise agreement with Microsoft can go to Microsoft and add this, and add Azure Enterprise Agreement as part of that. So the other thing to know is that enterprise agreements subscriptions are usually intended for large organizations or for customers that have a very, very large deployment base. Those are who that's intended for. The other thing to quickly mention is around whenever you have Microsoft Enterprise Agreement, you get a different portal, which I'll go to incognito mode now because I don't want it to sign me in. So I'll go to incognito mode. Oh, yeah, because I'm already signed in. So let's go get incognito where I'm not signed in. So to show you what that looks like. So what I'll do is I'll bring up Firefox. Hopefully I've not signed into this one. And I'll go to ea.azure.com and I'll press enter to that. And it takes me here. So essentially with this one, this portal, which I can't sign in because I don't have enterprise agreement, this portal takes you to a different portal. It's called the enterprise portal. And with this enterprise portal, the people that have access to those are people that have enterprise agreement with Microsoft. But one of the unique things about the enterprise agreement type subscription is that you can create multiple subscription. So what that means is, let's go back to our whiteboard very quickly and let's do something very quickly. So I have an enterprise agreement with Microsoft to consume 300K this year. What I can do is that once I have this, I can spin up multiple Azure subscriptions as part of this agreement, which is very cool because what I can do as an organization is this. Let's go back to our diagram and let's do a quick capture again. Let's bring that right here. Let's go, yeah, and let's make this smaller. What happens is I can spin up multiple subscriptions. So I can just go into this portal and create a new subscription. It's going to link all these subscriptions to my commitments that I've made with Microsoft. So it's going to link all of that. So this will be called enterprise agreement subscriptions. So I can just go, so somebody in marketing comes and says, hey, we want to spin up this other product. For some reason, I want that to be in a separate subscription. I don't need to go reach out to Microsoft or go to some other process. I can just go into this ea.azure.com portal and I can just go create another subscription and I can just go, here's another subscription. It's all linked to our spend that we've committed with Microsoft. We get all the discount that we've committed to Microsoft as part of that. So you can have multiple subscriptions and you can just keep creating them. So that's something that's unique to enterprise agreements when you have that. Again, remember the portal is different, which you have ea.azure.com. And there are other information that I could give, but that's really beyond the scope of this course. That we could give about the way that it works. So for example, the way annual payment works, the way the monetary commitment works, but I'll put that for another video that we can use. So this one also, you already mentioned that you can create multiple subscriptions. One of the advantages of enterprise agreement is better for managing teams. If you have multiple teams in your organization, you can just spin up different subscriptions for them, knowing that you can assign permission, which is, again, remember, administrative boundary. You can assign permission to this and it does not affect all the other ones. You can assign a separate permission to this and say, hey, development team, here's a subscription for you to test from Azure Active Directory. I'm going to assign this user as the owner for this. and the user cannot just jump on the production environment and begin to access that because they don't have access to that because that subscription gives that administrative boundary. There are other benefits like you have better discounts, you have better cash flow management. To me, I think the biggest one also as part of this when you're talking about cost is you have price protection. Because once you sign your agreement with Microsoft, that's the price that you're paying, no matter what the fluctuations are over the years, over the months. That's the price that you've agreed to with Microsoft, and that's the price that you're paying. So you get price protection with that. But that's the enterprise agreement. Another type of subscription that many of us probably already know is we have the pay-as-you-go subscription. Pay-as-you-go subscription is very straightforward. It's a single subscription that you spin up in Azure, and that subscription you link it to a credit card. Very simple and straightforward. You just pay as you go. You get your credit card. There's no monetary commitment or anything. And then you link this. That's linked to your subscription. So as you consume resources, those charges will be taken straight out of your credit card. Right? If you want more, you can go add another subscription. It's pay as you go. Link it to credit card. That's absolutely fine. But there's no price protection, there's no discount that you get with enterprise agreement, but you can definitely do that. So those are the options for really like the enterprise to use. Let's quickly move on and then I share some of the other options with you. So there's another type called open credit, which is really not as popular. So for those that are used to open subscription in the past, you can go to your Microsoft reseller and buy open credit. I can show you a little bit of what that looks like. What I'll do is I'll log into my Azure subscription and forgive me, I forgot to do this at the beginning. So you probably all already have my Azure information. So if I go over here and then if I go add a new subscription, for example, so I already have three, I can go add a new one. That takes me to single sign in or single sign on, and it should take me to the screen where I can sign up for more Azure subscriptions. So one of the subscriptions that I can sign up for, so I want to show you not just the pay-as-you-go one, the open subscription one. So if I go Azure in open, that's what it's called. So you can see the pay-as-you-go one over here, but it's the Azure in open one. So you can see that there's no enterprise agreement. That one requires, a separate option. You have to go to Microsoft or Microsoft reseller to do that. But Azure in open, you can select that. And what that allows you to do is you can specify your detailed information. But one of the things is that you go to a Microsoft reseller and you purchase certain Azure credit. You get a product key. For those that are familiar with open subscription methods will be familiar with this. You get a product key and you put in that product key here. That product key is associated with certain Azure credits. And then you put in your partner contact email address and then you go on and then you can essentially just load Azure credits into that. So that's what that option is. It's not something that's like really like encouraged that often, but it is available. It is an option. The other option is you have the partners, which many of you may know as the Microsoft CSP. So Microsoft CSP is where you essentially buy your Azure through a Microsoft partner. The Microsoft partner manages your Azure environment. They have access to that. They can give you access to a portal for you to be able to do certain things, but the Microsoft partner manages that for you. So it's a bit different from enterprise agreement. So the Microsoft partner will have a type of portal similar to like the EA portal where they can do a lot of management and do a lot of configuration on your behalf, and they can manage your entire workflow. But that's possible. So Microsoft will charge the partner, and then the partner will charge you. So in this case, you're not dealing directly with Microsoft, you're dealing directly with a partner. And then the partner can provide extra services to you beyond what Microsoft can provide to you. And that's the way that usually works. It's very popular, and actually Microsoft is driving people using this way. And of course, we have the personal options. So things like MSDN that I'm using, Visual Studio Enterprise. Actually, there's a nice document here that I'll share with you. And we'll take a little bit of a breather very soon so that we can rest a little bit because we're sharing just so many information that I think it can begin to get difficult to process everything. So let me share this document with you. So just a nice one that gives examples of some of the other subscriptions. You can see enterprise agreement, MSDN platform, that's a personal one, right? You can sign up for that. Visual Studio, Visual Studio Professional, Visual Studio Test Professional. Those are like personal type subscription. You can go buy Visual Studio, not enterprise, but you can go buy Visual Studio Professional, and then you get some Azure credit as part of that, or you can go sign up for MSDN platforms or whatever. Okay, any question regarding all those information that we've been passing on? Because there's a lot of a lot of information that we've been throwing around. Any questions at all? Everybody good? Or anybody needs anything clarified before we move on to another part? Yeah, good, good. Yeah, nice. Thanks very much, Shant. Yeah, everybody else good? Okay, I'll assume that everybody else is good. So I'll try to move on a little bit. Let's talk about something else. So that's around Azure subscription. But you look at some of the things. So we're going to talk about another concept of Azure. Here's the thing. So for example, with enterprise agreement that I talked about, that's absolutely great. But what could easily happen? You can see what could go wrong. You have your enterprise agreement portal. You're able to create subscriptions that are all linked to your commitment that you've made to Microsoft, and you get all the price protection and so. But you can just create these subscriptions as you want. And then you run into issues of how do you manage this. So for example, you have an organization security and compliance policies, set of policies that you have to apply by as an organization. How are you going to enforce and apply that across all these multiple subscriptions that you're creating? Because what happens is in Azure, let's go back to our whiteboard. If I have a subscription in Azure, let's go get our diagram back. You can tell that I'm a big fan of diagrams by now, and whiteboarding. It's absolutely nice. And Paint is absolutely amazing. Is you get your Azure subscription. If you want to, you can apply access to this subscription and say these are the people that have this level of access, role-based access control. You can apply it here. You can also apply things called policies, which we'll talk about today, hopefully. You can apply something called Azure policy to this subscription. And that's going to be inherited by the resource group in this subscription. That's going to be inherited by the resources in this subscription when you apply this on the subscription level. But now you have a situation where you have tens or probably hundreds of subscriptions as an enterprise. And that's not, I mean, how many subscriptions do you think Microsoft has as an organization? You can see where things can get out of control. So Microsoft recently announced the solution for that. And the solution is something called management groups. Management groups. What management groups are is it adds an extra level of hierarchy above the subscription. And I'll show you how that works. And the way that it works, it's a container for subscriptions. Let me show you a nice diagram that will highlight what that looks like. What I'll do is I'll get this diagram from over here and I'll put this here. And here we go. That's what it looks like. You have your management group at the top, and then you can link that to, you can contain your subscriptions within that. And then of course, within your subscriptions, you can have your resource groups and then you can have resources. This is something that's relatively new for Azure hierarchy. And it was put in place to solve the simple problem of how do we enforce organization-wide security and compliance policies at scale. How do we do that without having to go apply something on this subscription, apply something on this subscription, and then you're running around trying to chase down every subscription? But once you have the concept of management group, and you can group your subscriptions into different management groups and apply policies at the management group layer. Now, what I'll do is I'll show you very quickly how to set up management groups and what you need to do, what you need to be concerned about when you're setting them up. So I have this subscription over here. which I'll go back to my subscription, which I currently I have 3 subscriptions. But if I go under All Services here, and if I search for management groups, I can see management groups over here. If I click on that, it takes me to this screen and says, hey, you're not yet using management groups. So fine, I want to start using management groups. What I want to do is not click on this one yet. There's a few things that I need to do before I do that. First thing that I need to do is I need to go under my Azure Active Directory, and I need to go add myself permission, a permission to myself. So you can see it says here, access management for Azure resources. So it says this user, which is my user, can manage access to all Azure subscriptions and management groups in this directory. I have to change that to yes, first of all, to say, because somebody at least has to be able to manage something called the root management group, which I'll show to you, and I'll click save on that. So what that would do is to at least give this user at least that permission. So then I'll go and start creating management group. So that should not take too long. It's just going to take a few minutes. And then once it's saved that's done. Then I can go back on the management group and I can begin to create management groups. So if I go management groups and I go back here, I can click on start using management groups now. And it's going to do some validation and it's going to take me here. It says tenant root group. That's very important because once you click that button and says create management groups, it creates something called a root management group at the top. So what it's going to do is it's going to go, I'm going to create a root management group, which essentially means you can control every subscription in your organization. And what that means is once I create my root management group, I can now start creating other management groups under this. And within those management groups, I can be adding different subscriptions. So this is a management group by itself. I can create another one, which is another management group by itself. So I can have multiple management group. But what happens if I want to apply an organization-wide security or compliance policy, I can apply it at the root level if I want to. That's going to apply to every management group and subsequently every subscription under that root management group. If I want to apply a group subscription specific security policy, I can apply that at this level. So that does not need to go to anybody else in this. Let's say this is a production. These are for production systems. I can apply production specific security and compliance policies here. And this one is the dev one, so I can, let this one be a bit more relaxed. But anything that has to go to every subscription, production or dev, I can apply at the root management level. So that way I can cover my policy very easily. So you can see I have my tenant root group here, and I can start adding management groups under this. So for example, I can go group one, the management group ID. I can give the display name and say group one also, and I can go save. And it's going to add a new management group under the root group. If I want to configure the root group, I can click details here. So you can see that instantly when I do that, it shows me all my subscription, but also eventually, once it finished, you can see my management group one, and I can see all my subscription. They are all under the tenant root group. If I want to apply policies at the tenant root group, I can click on details. I can apply role-based access control over here and specify just at the tenant root group level, or I can apply policies, which we'll get to again, and I can apply policies at this level. Or what I can now also begin to do is I can go to group one, for example, or I can go to, let's go back. I can go to, let's go to management group, and I'll just put that over here so I don't need to be bouncing back and forth. I can go to this subscription, I can click on this, and I can click on move. And what I can do is I can move this subscription into a management group and say, now you're part of group 1, and I can save that. So now anything I had on that group 1 will apply to this subscription also. I can do the same thing for this other one if I wanted to. I could change this and say, you are also now part of group 1, and I can save that. And what will happen is that once that's applied, they both will now be under group 1. Now, if I apply anything on the group 1 level, any access control or policy, that's going to apply to all of the subscriptions on there, and subsequently all of the other resources under that. The other thing is, when it comes to this diagram that I was sharing earlier, let's go back, is that anything that I apply on a higher level, somebody that has permission at a lower level cannot overwrite that. So if I apply, let's say, a deny permission on the root management level, and then I give a user permission and I say, you are the owner of this subscription. That user that I've just made a owner of this subscription cannot override that deny permission at this level. Permission that's inherited is always enforced. So again, it's just a very cool way to achieve governance and management at scale across your Azure environment. Exactly, Mr. Taiwo, I agree. It's very good. It's a very good one. Okay, so does that make sense to us in terms of management group? I will just show you a few more information on what that looks like, and then we'll move on to talk about something else. So from what I've been describing, management group, you can group your subscriptions into logical group, which allows you to have a different organization model, right? It allows you to be able to specify governance controls, across your services at scale. Another good thing about management group, it also helps you with reporting, because what you can now do is that you can go to a management group and say, show me all the costs for all the subscriptions that are under this management group. And that is great. So for example, let's say you follow one of Microsoft best practices, which is you have a separate management group for production, a separate management group for development and test. You can have a look and say, hey, rather than running across all the subscriptions that you're using for test, once you have them all under a single management group, you can go to that management group level in Azure Billing and say, show me all the current spend that has to do with dev and testing. And it's going to just aggregate all those billings from all the subscriptions under that management group. And it's going to show you at the management group level and say, hey, there's all the billings for all of this. And then you can see how much you're spending for testing and development. So it's a very, very good service. So as you can see here, it provides a level of scope of subscription. You can have a management group, which is the root group. You can add other management group within a management group. So you can see here they have the root group, and then they have two management groups under that. But then under this one, they have two other management groups. So you can have a management group within a management group if you wanted to do that. And then what you can also do is you can go up to 6 levels in depth in terms of you can have a management group, a nested management group under that, another nested management group. You can go up to 6 levels deep when you're nesting management groups, but then you can now have those tagged across your subscriptions. So that's excellent. To the point of what I was talking to you earlier, this is one of the best practices. You can see the production management group here with production role-based access control and policies applied here. And you have another one for pre-production, maybe another one for development and testing. And this is Microsoft modeling strategies, the Microsoft recommended method for doing this. Here's another good one in terms of effective structure. So you can see what the effective structure is. You have your root management group, and then you have that linked into another management group here, another management group here, and then that's an effective structure. So rather than the other one that I showed to you at the beginning, which is this chaos over here, you've organized this chaos to something like this, something that's effective and something that's cool. And it's the same thing. You can see another good structure here. Again, you can see with this one, they're separating production and they're separating dev. And dev management group has its own subscriptions under that. Production management group has its own subscriptions. QA management group has its own subscriptions grouped together. If you're separating business units, they have their own subscriptions listed under their management group. So that's amazing. Here are some quick best practices for management groups. So number one, around security, there are some new roles for management group, contributor, and reader. I will show you what that looks like. At the moment, unfortunately, there's no activity log in the Azure portal for management group at the moment, unfortunately. So I'm sure that they will implement that. So what I mean, for those that are not aware, what I mean by that is, let's go to the portal again. If I go on the Azure subscription, there's if I go on the MSDN platform, there's this thing that you normally find under resource groups. And let's say I select a resource group, you see this thing called activity log that we usually find. And what this helps us to do is it helps us to see what are the API activities or any activity, any administration activity that is being done against this resource group. Unfortunately, that's not yet available for management group, so there's no activity log. So if you want to find out, for example, I just created a few management groups. You want to find out who created those management groups. Unfortunately, for now, you have to make API calls to be able to do that. So there's this tenant activity log. So you can check out tenant activity log API. And that's where you need to make an API call to be able to get that information to see who is doing what against management groups. In terms of scalability, like I mentioned, you can have up to 6 levels of depth, nested management group, but you can have up to 10,000 management groups in a single directory. So if you have a single Active Directory, Azure Active Directory account, you can have up to 10,000 management groups there. Okay, I think we've gone on for quite a while now because we started F6, time is almost F7 now. That's been a long time. How about we do this? How about I'm going to pause the recording now. Let's take a quick 10-minute breather because we can't just carry on this way because otherwise the mind becomes overloaded. So let's take a quick 10 minutes breather. Once we come back, I'll begin to introduce you to the concept of this Azure billing. I will start talking to you about 3 things with Azure billing that you need to know. Visibility in terms of Azure billing, accountability with Azure billing, and optimization with Azure billing. So take 10 minutes. We'll be back in exactly 10 minutes and then we'll pick up from here and then we'll talk about Azure billing and then we'll conclude by talking about Azure policy. So see you in a few minutes. Hello everyone, how are you doing? Are we back? Also, can you hear me? Hello? Everybody good? Nice, thanks very much. Okay, so that was a very good needed break because we've been talking a lot. Also, what I'm trying to do, just to mention, is that because this particular course, it's a hands-on course. The Azure Administrator series is meant to test, can you implement something? So we will get more hands-on as we go on, but these are kind of like the foundational topics, right? We're talking about subscription, we're talking about billings, we're talking about policy. So these are kind of like foundational or the core topics that we need to touch on. So as we go on, we'll do more demonstrations rather than more talking and more explanation and that type of stuff. So, but we need to lay the foundation first of all. So let's talk a bit about Azure billing now. So usually when you're talking about Azure billing, you have a single goal in mind when you're talking about it. And the goal of billing is generally you want to have clarity across about cost, clarity about spending. What am I spending? What's the cost of this spending? Um, you want clear understanding. You want to ensure for many organizations is to ensure that because many organizations you don't just you don't just run without a budget. Most organizations have a budget, right? And you have to adhere to your budget. So it's concerns around like this cloud thing. Can we just go out of control? Because if you spend that in Azure, you're going to be charged, you're going to be billed for it. Whether you're using PayAsYouGo subscription or you're using whatever subscription, you're going to be billed for it. And the other challenge when it comes to this area around billing is people that were not involved in those kind of decisions are now directly responsible for those kind of decisions. What do I mean by that? So in the past, let's say you're using Hyper-V or VMware on premises or whatever you're using on premises. You have your budget, you go to the management, and then management discusses that with the finance team, and then they agree and says we're spending 200K or 300K to buy new virtual hosts that we're going to use to deploy virtual machines. That's fine. Now to you, you're no longer at from that point, really your influence on the budget is not as much from that point on. Because once you buy your host, somebody comes and says, oh, we need a virtual machine of this size. That's very easy. For you, the cost has already been paid. You don't need to worry about that. As long as you have capacity for that, just go ahead and provision the needed virtual machines and everybody is good and everything just goes on smoothly. But now we're in a situation where you can just go spin up something and your company already has a commitment to Microsoft and says, hey, we're going to be spending 300K on Azure every year. But the thing is, you can go beyond that cost. And if you go beyond that cost at the end of the year, Microsoft will just say, hey, you need to top up. You know, you got 100K, 300K was what you committed to, but you ended up spending 400K. You got 400K more. Sorry, you got 100K more to pay us. So go ahead and pay us this money. So there's a bit of challenges when it comes to this area. The other challenge is people have old habits. So I'll give you an illustration. Somebody was telling a story about when they began to look at cost in the Azure environment. And so, for example, they did a check and they found about 32 terabytes worth of storage that was not used, but it was not cleaned up either. So people just create stuff, test stuff and just dump it and not clean it up. But the thing is, you're not cleaning things up, your cost will be accruing. But these are whole habits that people are used to. You put some files over there and some virtual machines over there. Nobody cares about it. You're not going to clean it up for the next 2-3 years. But you do that in the cloud environment like Azure, you're accruing cost when you do that. Another one is where somebody said, looked at the Azure environment and he saw a P11 Azure SQL database. Now, P11 Azure SQL database is a very expensive database. Azure SQL, very expensive. And went to the team and said, then the funny thing is that when he looked at it, he said, here's a database, very expensive one, but it's empty. There's no database in it. Or there's SQL Server that is provisioned, but there's no database in this. They went to talk to Tim and say, hey, Tim, what's going on here? You've got a server over there. It's no database in it. I said, yeah. We just provisioned it because we're planning a deployment. Says, okay, when is the deployment that you're planning? Oh, the deployment is in 2 weeks. Okay, that's fine. How long did it take you to create this database server? Yeah, it was very easy. It was very easy. Yeah, they just went ahead and just created it 2 weeks in advance, not using it, and it's going to be accruing cost. So there are certain things that you need to watch out for. And for you to be able to get a hold of this, there are 3 main things that you need to do. Number one is you need to get visibility into your cost. Where is the spending coming from? How is the spending going? You want to get that visibility. That visibility is core. It's very important. But it's not just visibility in terms of you can go to the Azure portal. Sometimes you want not just reactive visibility, which is you go to the portal. You want proactive visibility, which is where you get monitoring, right? You get alerting already set up, which is more proactive. If something is getting out of hand, you're alerted to it. It's not something that you need to go figure out in the Azure portal before you go, oh, that is strange. You want something to instantly tell you when something is going out of hand. So that's visibility. Talking about both reactive and proactive visibility. But then you're talking about accountability. How can we enforce certain standards so that things don't get out of control, right? So how do you make people accountable to some of those processes? Then you talk about optimization. So optimization with cost. So cost has now become a constant optimization process where you constantly review the information that you're getting from this and you're constantly improving and going, yeah, maybe we should start using this VM size rather than this VM size. Maybe we should start doing that. Here's one other good slide that I found on this topic. that I think is very interesting. So I'll go ahead and show this slide to you before I even go on to the other one. Just found this slide very, very interesting. And I want you to answer this question for me. So have a quick look at this. Yes, you have an application to run as a developer, right? You give your developers access to Azure. Your applications can run on 3 VM sizes, can run on VM1, can run on VM2, can run on VM3, can run comfortably on those 3 VMs. Which one do you think the developer will naturally choose when they're deploying when they're deploying the application? What do you think they will exactly? I said VM1. Does anybody know the reason why the developer will choose VM1? Why do you think developer will go for VM1? One of the reasons why the developer will go for VM1 is because traditionally developer, it's capacity, but traditionally also developers have been always measured with performance. How fast your application is performing. So to them, when they're seeing that, they're like, yeah, I know my application can run on on that, but I just want to be on the safe side. I will just provision this one. At least I know there's performance there for that. But the truth is your application will also run on VM3 comfortably. And VM3 is the one that will deliver more value to the business in terms of this. So that's just showing you what some of the challenges are when it comes to this, in terms of you have to not only understand this, you have to have a way of enforcing this as a behavior within your organization to know that you're changing your mindset when it comes to cloud economics. So that's what this is about. So let's start from the very first one very quickly because we have a short amount of time, and let's start by talking about the first point, which is around cost visibility. Now, cost visibility in Azure, as traditionally you go to Azure, you go and get some of the other services. So what Microsoft has done is Microsoft bought a company last year called Cloudin, and what they've done is they want to take the best of the Azure Enterprise Portal and the best of Cloudin, and they have a new service called Azure Cost Management, which is what I'll show you today. It's currently in public preview, but I'll show you what that is and how that can help you with your cost visibility. Um, this is their plan from what I could gather around how they're going to develop Azure Cost Management. So if you're using Enterprise Portal and Cloudin at the moment, know that development with that will gradually decrease as you see development ramp up on something called Azure Cost Management. But here's a very interesting thing that I found about Azure Cost Management I think many of you may like, is that Azure Cost Management will be completely free. You're not going to be paying for it. All the features that it's going to give to you in terms of visibility and proactive visibility and optimization and all of that, you're not going to be paying for any of that. It's part of the core Azure platform and it's going to be completely free. So I think that's a very, very good one by Microsoft. so very, very good option by Microsoft. So let's have a look at what that looks like. So what I'll do is I'll go to my Azure portal and I'll show you what that looks like very quickly. So under Azure portal, you have this here that says cost management plus billing. If you don't have that there, you can always go under all services and you can search for costs, and then you get cost management and billing there, and you can click on that. You can see it's in preview. So preview means there's currently no SLA associated with that, but they're constantly ramping it up. So you go under that, and then you have Azure Cost Management here. So this is the real one that we're talking about. But one of the first things I want to show you is under the overview section, I can scroll down and I can see my recent billing history. So it's going to show me like what my spend is like over the past couple of months. So you can see I've been very busy on the subscriptions, not a subscription I use all the time, but you can see like, November I've got a bit of charges there, and it's going to show you, but that's only showing you, that's going to be showing you for across all your subscriptions, by the way. But you can see that information from there. If you want to, you can click on details, where it's going to allow you to select to go select that by chart, and you can see that, or you can select by grid. You can also filter and say show me just for this subscription, and it's going to show you what that subscription looks like. The other thing I should mention is that this is only showing you the cost for Microsoft services. Some of you may be making a use of maybe a third-party firewall like Sophos Firewall or anything like that. If you're making use of such third-party services, there's a different place that you need to go to. You can see it says here, external services are invoiced separately. So this is only showing you the cost for Microsoft Charge services or Microsoft services. So for external services or marketplace services that you're using, you need to go under your subscription, and then under your subscription, you'll be able to see external services here. And this is where you'll be able to see essentially, the other marketplace services that you're paying for, and then you'll be able to drill down into some visibility of what the cost of those look like. So it's still loading mine, but you can see some of the ones that I've deployed over the time, and then you can see what's active, and then you can drill down and see what some of the billings are for that. So this is where you see that information, not the other place. Okay. So the other thing is in terms of how you can get a bit proactive when it comes to monitoring of this. So this is a very important one. Let's go under cost management plus billing. And what I'll do is I'll go under cost management. And this is a very interesting one. I absolutely love this one. It's where you can set budgets. I think this is amazing. It's currently in preview. It's currently only available for pay-as-you-go and enterprise agreement subscriptions, EA subscriptions, but Microsoft have promised to release it for pay-as-you-go and other subscriptions. This is where you can set a budget, and you can go ahead and you can add a budget. Because I don't have the right subscription, it's not giving me the option to do that. But what you can do is you can add a budget and say, for example, the budget for this subscription is £4,000. And you can set up alerting and monitoring so that when you're moving close to the budget that you've set, you can be made aware that, hey, we're getting close to budget here. And then you can go and drill down. That's when the reactive visibility comes into play. So you get the proactive visibility going where you're alerted when something is getting close to being wrong, and then you can come and drill down in the Azure portal and try to find out what's the cost, why we are getting close to budget this quickly. So you can use something like cost analysis to do that. And cost analysis will allow you to select and drill down, and you can specify maybe by tags. You can specify what the cost looks like by tags. You can specify what it looks like by resource. Check maybe if it's the cost is being driven by a resource type. Maybe somebody's spinning up a virtual machine, or maybe it's somebody's spinning up a database, Azure SQL platform database, or Azure Web App. You can drill down by resource and try to figure out where all of that is coming from. You can even export some of those reports, but to me, I think budget is a very great one in terms of how you get visibility, and you can configure that, and you can configure alerting alongside with that. So that's just some quick information around visibility and being conscious of time here. Let's talk a little bit about accountability in terms of cost accountability. Cost accountability, there's a few things that you want to do. First of all, is you can use management group to organize your subscriptions. And what that allows you to do is you can view the cost at a higher level. So for example, if I go on that console route, I'll be able to see the cost for all the subscriptions within my organization. But if I go to this level, I can see what's the subscriptions associated with the infrastructure team, what the cost is for those. So, and that's not going to show me all the other ones. So this is a very great tool for being able to get visibility at different levels within your organization. So it's a very, very good one. Other things around accountability is the concept around tagging. So you want to enforce tagging across your organization. Tagging is a very good feature for cost analysis. So you want to ensure that people are not allowed to create resources without tagging the resource. So, and these are some basic tags that you can enforce. So things like finance codes, you can specify. Oh, 1 minute. Can you give me 1 minute? I'll be back in 1 minute. Yeah, apologies, just went quickly up on off my wife. Okay, so yeah, you can enforce tagging across your organization. So for example, you want to ensure that people are not able to deploy resources without specifying a finance code, right? without specifying things like a deployment context. So, for example, is this a production cost? Is it a dev and development cost? Is it a QA cost? So you want to enforce like that. So you want to say at least at the minimum, whenever you deploy a resource, it has to have finance code, it has to have a deployment environment code, it has to have a owner code. So for example, if I'm doing my reactive analysis of the costs and I find out that a particular resource, right, is just spinning up cost out of control, I want to have somebody who is accountable for that. And how are you going to figure that out? You can either go and start trying to dig through the log, through the activity log to figure out who created that resource, or you can enforce at the beginning and say, hey, we're going to have, let's see, we've got some messages. Okay, yeah, I'll get to the question, Leon. You're going to have to say, 1 minute. Yeah, so you want to go ahead and say who is accountable for this resource. So that's what you want to do when it comes to that. So, and enforcing tagging is how you're going to be able to do that. So Leon has a question because I think that this is probably where we'll round up for today. And what I'll do is I'll pick up from this next week. I'll talk a little bit um, about accountability, and then we'll talk about optimization. In terms of in terms of accountability, let me show you what I mean by where you can enforce costs. So for example, we have management group already enabled. I can go, for example, to my tenant routes and I can enforce certain policies. So one of the policies that I can enforce is I can enforce a policy around tags. And if I go, sorry, I need to go to assign policy first of all, and we'll talk about policy next week also. And on the policy definition, I can go select, and it's going to show me a list of, I think, about 140 or 140 something, 145 policies. I can search for tags or tag, and I can see enforce tag and its value or apply tag and its value. And I can do that and say, hey, if you're going to be deploying the resources, you're not going to be allowed to deploy the resources except you have these 4 tags around the cost center, around the deployment environment, around the owner. So except you have these tags, you won't be able to deploy the resource. So these are basic things that can help you to have accountability for your costs. And I think I'll even be able to demonstrate this for you next week, but because of time, we'll have to stop here for today and I'll take a few questions and then we'll stop for now. So let me go to the question that I have here. So Leon says, I have a quick question on billing information. I have a Microsoft sponsorship and I cannot see the billing information on Microsoft Azure Sponsorship.com. It says the account does not have an active sponsorship. How do I get around that? Oh, I'm not too sure about the answer for that, Leon. Microsoft Azure Sponsorships.com. So are you accessing it, Leon, are you accessing that from the Azure portal? Is that where you manage that from? You manage, yeah, yeah, from the so from the portal, can you go under cost plus management plus cost management plus billing? And under cost management from billing, can you go under go under overview and see what you can see in terms of the information, and also go under cost management. So one thing I should say is that this particular, so under cost management here, this is only currently available to enterprise agreement and pay-as-you-go customers. Pay-as-you-go and enterprise agreement subscriptions, and it's not yet available for all the other types of subscription. So that may be related to what you're having. Let's go. Any other questions? So Leon wants me to unmute. Let's unmute Leon. Hello, Leon. I've unmuted you. Yeah, doing good. Thanks. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. 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 Ah, really? Yeah. That's yeah. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. 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 Mhm. Even though if you go under check your balances, so because this I think I can see what you're talking about. So this is a different type of subscription, and it seems to be managed differently. So it's taking you to this portal and it says check your balance. Even if you click check your balance, you cannot see anything. Yeah. So I'm not too familiar with this type of subscription, the Microsoft sponsorship. My recommendation would be raise an email with Microsoft support and say, please, can you clarify how to get billing information about this? Yeah. Yeah, so because even me, like for example, I'm not sure. I didn't even know that I've got. I went to under Azure subscription and it showed me this one. Yeah. Yeah. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I'll say raise a support call with Microsoft and find out why. Yeah, and find out why. Yeah, that's what I'll recommend. Yeah, no problems at all. So, any other questions at all? Okay, if there are no other questions, thanks very much for joining today's Hangout. Next week we'll pick up from where we stopped. We talk about more on cost optimization. Sorry, cost accountability and cost optimization. We'll talk about Azure governance, which is mainly talking about Azure policies and how we can use Azure policies to control governance in our environment. And then we'll talk about Azure monitoring, which is around proactive and reactive monitoring around Azure monitoring and Azure diagnostics. So that's what we'll talk about in the very next Hangout. So thanks very much for joining, everyone, and see you next time. So Leon, so somebody has put in a message that says Microsoft sponsorship is a free credit from Microsoft. Yeah, so here's the thing is that yeah, it is free. So like the others. So but I think what Leon is saying, Mr. Jay, is that what Leon is saying is that he was expecting to be able to see how much is left, how much he has used, and how much is left from this portal. So, but what he's saying is that even if he goes to this portal, he cannot see anything. So that seems to be something is going wrong somewhere. Yeah, sure, sure. So the video will be posted on YouTube, no problems at all. So, Mr. Mutayad, yeah, yeah, exactly, yeah, yeah. So the video will be posted on YouTube. So that's what Leon is having is that he should be seeing at least this to see what's the amount that I've got, even though it's free given by Microsoft, but still to be able to see what's the amount I've got, what's the amount that's left, and that. So that's the main thing that he was having. Okay, so just remember that if next week if you have any questions on around that, just let me know. Just you can reach out in the group, post your questions, and then we can get together as a group and study. So thanks very much for joining. See you next week, Wednesday and Thursday. Have a wonderful week and weekend. Thanks. Bye, everyone.